Our next witness is anonymous. In his case, there will be no live streaming. As with the previous anonymous witness, I will make an order, and the terms of that order will probably be familiar to you, but I will read it out nonetheless. The name and address of witness W1275, that's Mr. A.F., to you and me, the name of his brother who died, and the name of any other member of the witness's family and any other identifying information, such as the witness's image or a description of their appearance, cannot be disclosed or published in any form unless express permission is given by me or by the solicitor to the inquiry acting on my behalf. Witness W1275 must be referred to only as Mr. A.F. The order remains in force for the duration of the inquiry and at all times thereafter, unless otherwise ordered, and I may vary or revoke the order by making a further order during the course of the inquiry. So, as before, not only please respect that order, but that is something which binds us all. Mr. A.F.
And so I should say, whilst Mr. A.F. And his wife make their way up, Mr. A.F. may use the names of family members during the course of his evidence. It is because of that that there is no live streaming of his evidence, but the order that you have made obviously prevents anyone who is hearing those names listening to the evidence here is prohibited from disclosing or publishing that information.
Yes, thank you for that.
Mr. A.F., your full name is known to the inquiry. Could you please take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
The evidence I should give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth. Thank you.
You're here to talk about how you were infected with HIV and hepatitis C, and also to talk about your brother who died of AIDS.
Yes.
You have severe haemophilia A.
I do.
And your older brother also had severe haemophilia A.
Yes.
Your treatment, at all the times with which we're concerned, was at the Cardiff Haemophilia Centre under the care of Professor Bloom.
Yes.
So too was your brother's, but because he was older than you, as a child he had some treatment elsewhere, is that right?
Yes, at the Royal Infirmary.
And also some treatment in Oxford prior to that?
Yes.
Now, in your childhood, you were treated largely with cryoprecipitate, I think.
Yes, always with cryo.
And what did that involve?
Lengthy stays in hospital, sometimes weeks on end, and having big batches of cryoprecipitate, which I tried to avoid as much as possible. So a lot of bleeds I had, I didn't report. It was just a case of hot and cold water and carry on like that until the bleed subsided.
And you've described in your statement that when you were about 10 or 11 years old, you became jaundiced, and you've subsequently learnt that that was hepatitis B that you'd experienced. And your brother also in his teens had hepatitis B.
He did, yes.
That had cleared in both your cases.
Yes.
Was there ever any discussion with you or with your parents at the time about the hepatitis B and the cause of it?
No, it was just as if it was another bleed, really. It was just turned yellow for a couple of weeks, and it cleared.
Now, there came a point where your treatment became factor VIII.
Yes.
As did your brother's. Were you or your brother ever given any warnings or advice or information about any risks of infection associated with the use of the factor VIII?
No, nothing. We were just told that I never went to school as a youngster. I went for about a month's period when I was about 5 or 6, and a couple of bleeds occurred in that time, so they refused to take me in the end in school, so I had a home tutor, and when I was 13, they called us into the hospital to say there was factor VIII available, and it would mean I could go to school and live a much more normal life than what I had done.
And you said in your statement you were essentially led to believe it was a wonder drug.
It was a wonder drug, yes.
You've also said in your statement that had you, or you believe had your brother, known of any risks, you'd both have chosen not to take those risks, but to have cryoprecipitate or bed rest. Or...
Absolutely, cryoprecipitate worked for me, it worked for my brother, and we would be glad he stayed on it, because that's the treatment we knew.
Well, just look at some records which show the range of different products that you received. Paul, it's 1275008, please. And if we go to the third page, please, Paul. So we can see here there's a record 1971 cryoprecipitate, and then we see the first record of you receiving factor VIII products in 1978, Travanol, Highland, Hemophil, factor VIII, then cryoprecipitate again. And then if we continue looking up the page, we can see you received pretty much every factor VIII product that there was.
Yes.
Profilate, Co8, factor VIII, cryobulin, Travanol, etc., BPL factor VIII. In all that time, in the period that we see there, was there ever any discussion with you about different products, NHS, BPL factor VIII as against the commercial products?
No, it was basically you go to the hospital for your appointment and give you the home treatment, and it was whatever was available at the time. So it was, you know, it was no shock to have different batches or different makes. It was all factor VIII to us.
And you and your brother were given this, or would be given the same batches, and you, if you needed to, you would share between yourselves?
Yes, if one of us ran out, we'd share to save going back to Cardiff to pick more treatment up, because we live about 30 miles away.
Now, in 1983, your wife was pregnant, and you were asked by Professor Bloom to go and see him.
Yes.
What can you recall about that discussion?
He wanted us to have a termination, and the way he put it to us was that to end the haemophilia in our family, if we had the termination, that would do that. It would be a 50-50 chance otherwise of, if it was a boy, of having haemophilia. So he recommended a termination.
You and your wife didn't accept that advice in 1983.
No, personally, I might have. If it was something he said to me to do, personally, I would have done what he suggested. But my wife, being my wife, questioned it, and he wasn't happy with his explanation, so we refused.
You've observed in your statement that you found the reasoning that he was giving you somewhat strange. You didn't understand why he was saying this.
No, because things were up in the air. We didn't realise whether it... I was always under the impression that if you had a boy, it would be a 50-50 chance of the boy having haemophilia, or a girl would be a 50-50 chance of being a carrier. And I mean, I was living, you know, a full life, really, even though I had haemophilia, so it wasn't a good enough reason to not have a child.
Just going to look at 3 documents. Could we have up on screen, please, Paul, 1275004. Now, this is from your medical notes. We see 22nd of September 1983. And we can see the last line of that entry, wife pregnant, genetics explained. Now, your recollection, based upon where you were, where your wife was in the pregnancy, is in fact the discussion you had with Professor Bloom was earlier than that, perhaps in May of 1983.
Yes, because that would have been too late to have a termination at that date.
So you don't understand why it appears in your records for the 22nd of September 1983?
No.
The second document I want us to look at, Paul, this is a different witness number, please. It's 1656003. Now, this is a letter dated the 21st of June 1983, and it's sent in respect of your brother, and it's exhibited to your sister-in-law's witness statement. And it's referring to a review of your brother in Professor Bloom's clinic and reference to prophylactic home treatment. And then it says this halfway down the paragraph: further routine bloods were taken, and in addition, a specific investigation of his immune status was undertaken by Dr. Moffat as part of a survey of severe haemophiliacs who've required a lot of factor VIII over the years in view of the possibility of an acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS. Now, that's June 1983, not long after you think you had the discussion with Professor Bloom about a termination, and reference there in the letter written about your brother to blood tests being taken because of the possibility of AIDS. We just look at your records, Mr. AF. If we look at 1275003, the bottom entry, please, Paul, if you could highlight. The 19th of May 1983. So this is around the time you think that you had that conversation. Last two lines. Dr. Moffat took bloods for AIDS. Now, were you aware at the time, was your consent sought to blood being taken for the purpose of some form of testing in relation to AIDS?
No. No.
And did you know that this had taken place at all?
No.
And as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, the suspicion you now have, the two of you, is that the advice that you were being given by Professor Bloom to terminate may not have been because of the genetic consequences of haemophilia, but because of the suspicion or possibility that you might have been infected with AIDS.
Absolutely.
But that wasn't told to you.
No.
How did you learn that you had been infected with HIV?
We were asked to go up, myself, my wife, my brother and his wife, and to see Professor Bloom. There was a small ante room and then a treatment room, and he called, was it us first or was it, we went in first, and he told us that I was infected. Yes, it's not to discuss it with anyone else at all, not even my brother. No one in the waiting room or any of the other boys that we used to see regularly there. And that was it, basically.
You've said in your statement that the practical advice you were given was to use your own cutlery, toothbrush and towels.
Yes, towel, toothbrush, cup, saucer, spoon.
Was there any discussion about sexual practices and the possibility of infecting children?
No.
You've described in your statement that this was delivered in a very matter-of-fact way, but it was a bombshell.
Yes.
And your wife's statement describes it as a short, cold and matter-of-fact discussion.
It was. It was just like any other consultation. You'd go in and, you know, how are you doing? And this is the treatment regime we wanted to stick to now, and that was it.
Were you given any information about likely prognosis?
No. No, and I didn't ask, to be honest. It was such a shock that it didn't even sink in at the time, so I didn't ask any questions.
And your brother and his wife were told on the same day?
Yes, in the same way.
Did you know that you had been tested for HTLV3, as it then had been called?
No.
Just, again, look at a small number of your records. You said in your statement you think this was July 1984 that you were told this. If we look at 1275010, this is an extract from the National Haemophilia Database, and it certainly records date first positive as the 15th of July 1984, which accords with your recollection of when you learnt the news. And then if we just have up on screen 2 further documents. First of all, please, Paul, 1275006. Now, this is a letter of the 23rd of November 1984, and we can see it refers to you having been to outpatients and having been examined by Professor Bloom. And then it says this: we discussed your fears about AIDS and hope that we have reassured him to some extent. So it's clear from this document in your records that by November 1984 you'd been told.
Yes.
You've got thousands of pages of medical records have been provided to you. There is no record which shows the discussion that you had in July or whenever precisely it was with Professor Bloom telling you your diagnosis.
No, there's nothing in them.
And there's no HDLB3 test results from that time in your records?
No.
So those are simply not there?
No.
And then the second letter, please, Paul, 1275005. We can see this is, if we could just enlarge it, thank you, a letter of the 4th of March 1985. It's from Professor Bloom to a GP. And it's really just to pick up what's said in the second paragraph. As with many of the haemophiliacs, he has, of course, been exposed to the HTLV3 virus, the putative agent of the acquired immune deficiency syndrome. His tests for antibody to this virus were positive. And so that's Professor Bloom's description to your GP of what was known by March 1985. What was the impact of the diagnosis upon you and indeed your wife and your brother and his wife at that early stage?
As other people have said, it was a bombshell, and especially what was going on with the media as well. We knew we had to keep it quiet. No one else could know. And I mean, we had friends at the time, didn't we? They knew. I never made it public that I was a haemophiliac, even because I had some stick in school from it. So it was only the very close few people who knew from being in school with me that I was a haemophiliac. And even they started asking questions, you know. We've seen this advert about AIDS and linked it with haemophiliacs. So they asked, did it affect us? But it just came out and said it bluntly. So we found ourselves retreating back from life, really, and everyone. I didn't want to see anybody else. And we just kept it within the family, didn't we?
And in 1984, I think your wife's statement suggests 1985, but I think now it was 1984. Your wife was pregnant again.
Yes.
And on this occasion, the two of you decided that the pregnancy would be terminated.
Yes.
And why was that?
Because we knew by that time I was infected, and everything we were told and everything we'd read about it said that if my wife went through with the pregnancy, that the baby would more or less definitely be infected, and it could also infect my wife.
Now, it was a number of years later that you learnt you'd been infected also with hepatitis C.
Yes.
In your statement, you thought that you were told that information by Professor Bloom and Dr. Dasani together. But we've discussed it this morning, and you now think that you learnt of your diagnosis with hepatitis C only after your brother died.
It was definitely, yes.
He died in late 1992.
Yes.
And so that would put the date upon which you were told as being possibly 1993.
That's right.
And you think now it wasn't Professor Bloom, but it was Dr. Dasani,
Dr. Dasani,
who
yeah.
gave you the diagnosis. So that's 1993. We'll just look at a test result that's in your medical records. It's 1275007, please, Paul. We can see the date of this is the 6th of June 1991, and we see at the bottom we have stamped antibody to hepatitis C virus detected. Were you aware in 1991 that tests were being done in relation to hepatitis C?
No,
And were you told in 1991 that this was the result?
no.
When you were told, you think in 1993, about the hepatitis C diagnosis, what can you recall about the information that you were given?
We were just told about the test, that it came back and it was positive. And to be honest, it wasn't even on my radar at the time because it was HIV, it was killing everybody. So I thought it was just going to be in the background, and the way it was explained that it might never come to anything, and if it did, it was years in the future. So it really didn't bother me.
Were you given any advice about the practicalities of managing hepatitis C, not passing on the infection, or lifestyle adjustments that you might want to make?
I asked about, because obviously it's to do with the liver, about drinking, and so I stopped drinking straight away. And what did they say about?
Not to unprotected sex.
Yeah, not rather than protected sex, yes.
Now, you said in your statement, following your diagnosis with HIV, in terms of your physical health, you were okay for a while.
That's fine.
It was towards the end of the 1980s that your brother began to fall very ill.
Yes.
Can you tell us how his health deteriorated?
I think he hid a lot of it from me because obviously we were in the same boat, and we grew up. My mother died when I was young, so my brother and my sister looked after me and my other brother. So he shielded me from a lot of it. But I could see he was getting ill, and the family could see he was getting ill. And they put us on AZT then. That's what came out. But what they told us was that it would be a blind study, that some people would receive AZT, some people would receive a placebo. And as it turned out, my brother had the placebo.
You had the drug and your brother had
I
the
had
placebo. You obviously didn't know that at the time.
No.
You felt guilty
Yes.
about the fact that you received treatment and he didn't.
Yeah. And what made it worse, that I think we were taking about 15 tablets a day, and I was well, so as far as I was concerned, there was nothing to treat really, so I was just taking them as and when I was remembering to take them. And he took his morning, noon and night by the clock, and I think that made it worse.
And your statement suggests that you're also troubled that there may have been a deliberate decision to give you, as brothers who were infected with the same condition, potentially even from the same batch, given you one deliberately the treatment, one deliberately a placebo to see what happened.
Yes, absolutely. We were too close with the same treatment. We were, both severe haemophiliacs. We had too much in common for them not to give us one placebo.
And you've described in your statement that although in the late 80s you were physically not at that stage unwell, watching your brother become ill, watching others around you falling ill and dying, you felt you were just waiting for your turn.
Yeah. It was like taking a ticket at Tesco's counter. It was just, who's next?
You believed your days were numbered
Yes.
and you didn't think anything mattered.
No,
And you've said you essentially just took each day as it came.
I did.
You've recollected in your statement when you were on the AZT treatment, Dr. Dasani taking bloods from you for the purposes of various tests, but then taking an additional vial of blood. And what did he tell you that was for?
I never questioned it up until all this kicked off. There was always an extra. When they take blood, it always goes into little glass vials. It's done direct from the needle. But there was always either 5 or 10 mil extra of blood taken in a small syringe. And I did question it only once, and I asked what's the extra blood for? And he said, this is for our studies. The rest will go to the lab, and this is for our studies.
Now, your brother died in late 1992.
He did.
We have a statement from your sister-in-law and from your nephews, but what can you tell us about your brother's illness and his death?
He, as I said, he was going downhill rapidly towards the end, but he knew that I was in the same boat, as I said. But he never once moaned. He never asked why me. He never complained at all. He just tried to carry on as best he could and to stay alive as best he could. But he, without a doubt, the bravest person I've ever met in my life.
Because he became very physically frail towards the end.
He did. He lost his sight. It was horrendous. I'm ashamed to say that there were times when I thought I couldn't go down to see him because it was hard to watch. But I did go. And not long after, Matty passed away.
You went off the rails after his death.
I did.
You started drinking, although you then later gave that up after you received the hepatitis C
Yes.
diagnosis. And in 1993, you developed yourself pneumonia, PCP pneumonia, and you were given only a few weeks to live.
Yes, I didn't know that at the time. I was in intensive care, and he was coming back and forth to look after me, and family members would come in with my father or my sister-in-law, my sister, whoever it was. And I woke up one day, and there was about 5 or 6 of them standing around the bed. And I can remember looking at them and thinking, what the hell are they all doing here? I thought, they couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery, this lot. Why have they all come at the same time to see me? Couldn't they organise, different times? But then I realised later that that's the time when they phoned the family to come in to say goodbye to me, basically.
Now, in terms of the emotional and mental effect of the diagnosis, you, having been told by Professor Bloom not to tell anyone and aware of the stigma and the abuse that others suffered, you decided, as you've told us, not to tell anyone other than very close relatives. And you essentially shut yourselves away.
Yes.
You cut yourself off from friends because you didn't want them to put 2 and 2 together.
No, to this day I don't. The only friends I have are involved with this. I don't have any other friends. There's many friends, and friends' husbands come back and forth to the house to me. But I won't make friends. I won't make friends anymore.
And you ended up moving away so that people wouldn't know who you were.
The village where I was born and grew up, we decided to move from there because when I was ill, people would come around and they would ask what's wrong with me, and they were putting 2 and 2 together, basically.
You received notification at some stage about the risk of variant CJD.
Yes.
Your statement puts it at 1995, but the medical records suggest, in fact, it was 2001.
Right.
But we'll just have a look at a document from your medical records, please. It's 1275002. And it's the top entry. And we can see there it talks about information re VCJD. I have informed, and that was you, that in September 1997 they've been exposed to Replinate factor 8, and the batch number is there given. This batch had a donor who has now developed VCJD. The exact implications unknown at the moment. We will keep him informed as renewed developments. I think you recall being given this information by, was it Dr. Desani?
Dr. Desani, yes.
And you've said that it was this that has frightened you more than anything.
Yes, and it still does now because HIV is under control. It's been up and down over the years, but it is under control. I've now cleared Hep C, but this is still hanging over me.
And it's unknown.
Yes.
As you've said, you've had various treatments for HIV over the years. The AZT was particularly bad in terms of side effects.
Yeah, it was, yes.
You experienced diarrhea, weight loss, sickness, and your memory, mood and sleep were affected.
Yes.
You've had, I think, 3 courses of treatment for hepatitis C.
That's correct, yes.
And the first, which was around 2002, was interferon and ribavirin.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that experience?
We were told at the time it wasn't going to be good, but I didn't realise how bad it was going to be, and I don't think I did either, because it was horrendous. It changed me as a person. I argued with everyone. Our son, which I have never had a crossword with in my life, and never since, I argued with him. I wanted to kill everybody that come across my path. I was in a rage all the time, to the extent where someone cut across me in a car. It just went on and on and on like that. It was horrendous.
You had that treatment for about 4 months.
Yes.
And it seemed as though it was clearing the virus, but in fact it hadn't, and it returned very quickly. You then developed pancreatitis.
Yes.
What happened then?
It was an interaction between the treatment and the HIV drugs. That's my take on it, that I was taking, and it turned into pancreatitis. So I was in hospital for that, and they sent me down to intensive care then.
And you had to stop the treatments for your HIV for a time?
Yes.
Because of that. And then you tried a second course of treatment, which was just ribavirin, no interferon.
Yes.
You've put it in a very understated way in your witness statement. It was just the normal side effects, night sweats, vomiting.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad, that one, yeah.
Because you didn't have the same behavioural mood
No.
changes that you'd had before. You took that for about 6 months.
That's right.
And you thought it had worked.
Yes, yeah, I started feeling better, even though the side effects were there. They weren't nothing like the other one.
But it hadn't.
No.
And the virus came back 3 weeks later.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it was something like a 93% success rate with that particular drug. And I remember seeing the consultant, and he said to me, he said, look, I'm not expecting any bad news at all. He said, you know, if you've got a good clearance rate, he said, you'll be fine. And then he rang me up and he said, remember what I said to you? He said, you're in the 7%, unfortunately.
You finally had a third course of treatment in 2017.
Yes.
And that was Harvoni.
Yeah.
3 months and no real side effects.
No side effects at all.
And that has resulted in the virus clearing.
It has, it's gone.
You have made this observation in your statement. You said, my body is just knackered and has probably now given up. I don't think I even noticed the side effects of treatment.
No, if there was, I honestly didn't notice anything.
You do have ongoing monitoring in relation to your liver.
I do.
And is it fibroscans twice a year?
Yes.
Right. And you say that helps your peace of mind.
It certainly does, yes.
You eventually told your son, when he was in his teens, about your diagnosis. And you eventually told your parents-in-law. But your friends still don't know.
No.
What's the effect been on you and indeed your family of living for so many years a life that's partly in secret?
It's been like living under a cloak is the only way to describe it, because, as I said, I want to make friends with people because I don't want people getting close, because if I became ill again, there'd be too many questions asked. I'm lucky now I'm on a different treatment for haemophilia, so I don't get hardly any bleeds at all. So that's not an issue. But the first thing I do, if I'm ill, is lose weight, and rapidly. And it's so noticeable that I'm worried people will ask questions.
Have you or your wife ever been offered any psychological support or counselling?
Recently, yes, but not up until recently.
And in the years in which your brother was ill, up until his death, was he offered counselling or support, or his family?
No.
Ask you first of all about the impact that your illness and the treatments you've had for them has had on your ability to work.
I left school because I went to school with the factor 8, and I didn't like it at all. I wasn't used to it. So I left school at 15. I went straight into a job working with heavy plant, which is great for haemophilia. About a year and a half in, I was up a jib of a crane and fell off and injured my knee, and that was it. The job was over from that point. But with the ups and downs of the treatment and the side effects and everything, I haven't worked since then.
And your wife has described in her statement that because of the ill health and so on, the treatments, the effects of it, that's affected her choices in relation to her work. She had a successful shop, but ultimately had to sell that.
Yeah, we had a shop which we built up from nothing. I used to help as much as I could, and she worked very hard with it. But when I was really ill that time, she said, right, that's it, we need to sell the shop now, because, you know, and that's the one thing that I always hoped we'd be able to keep, because it gave me peace of mind if something happened to me, that I wouldn't be reliant on the trust or any other money. She'd have her own money coming in. But even that was taken away from us then.
And she puts it this way in her statement: she's had to change and adapt her plans all the way along.
Yes. Yeah, we've become very good at that.
Just ask you about your experiences with the trusts and schemes. First of all, you were involved, as was your brother, in the litigation, and you referred in your statement to being asked to sign a waiver in 1991.
We were, yeah. We were told that there was a waiver that will circulate around all the beneficiaries, and if one person didn't sign it, then nobody would get anything. We waited, we spoke to other people, and we were lucky because in Cardiff there was a couple of high-profile campaigners, and we decided not to sign the waiver. We waited, and we both said, myself and my brother, if it comes to it that nobody's going to get any money, we'll sign it. But until that point, we're not signing it at all, so we didn't sign it.
And in fact, you did get the payment.
We did.
You had an experience of asking the McFarlane Trust for a deposit to help you acquire a Motability car.
Yes.
What happened with that?
McFarlane Trust was always yes one day, no the next day. So I asked for, because where we live, we needed a four-wheel drive. We didn't have money to buy a car, so I asked for a deposit. And they turned us down, basically. They said, no, I'm sorry, we don't do that anymore. We used to do it, but we've stopped doing it now. So I was really annoyed with it, because it's something we needed, and it was the trust that told me they didn't do it anymore. So I put the phone down, and I wrote a letter to him saying that on some of the different websites and the Facebook sites, somebody had put on there that the widow of someone who passed away had a grant for a computer or a laptop or whatever it was for her son, who wasn't infected obviously affected but not infected, and I wasn't able to get something being infected and something I needed. And within, I think it was 3 weeks, he got back to me and said, the full grant is now available for you. But without the fight, I wouldn't, you know.
They want to pay the garage direct.
Yeah, they wanted, that was the next thing. We're not going to give the money to you because we can't be guaranteed that that's what you'll use it for. So they said, we'll pay the garage direct. And I said, no, you won't pay the garage direct because they'll want to know where the money's coming from. They'll question me about it. I said, I'm not explaining myself. So I said, you need to send it to me, or simple fact, I'll go to papers with it. I would never have gone to papers, but the threat was enough for them to send me the cheque.
You now receive monthly payments from the Welsh Infected Blood
Yes.
Support Scheme, and you've referred to the top-up payment that's started to be made, but the uncertainty of knowing whether that will continue to be
Yes.
made. And your overall experience of the trusts, as described in your statement, is that they weren't fit for purpose. No. You're made to feel, you've said, as if you're begging.
Yeah, you have to justify ourselves all the time, every step of the way. As we heard this morning, there used to be a booklet they'd send out saying you can claim X amount for this, once a year, X amount for that, and then that went. So it was potluck. I think if your name fitted, if you hadn't ruffled too many feathers, you might be in with a chance of getting something, but otherwise you had to fight for every penny. And
has that changed? Is your impression any different with the current Welsh scheme?
I'm not aware there's a mechanism for claiming anything else other than the normal payments now, so I can't comment on.
I ask you for your perspective on what the effect of your infection and illness and treatment has been on your wife and on your family.
Yes, I thought about this, and it's quite a difficult one, really, because never moans. She has looked after me. She's consoled me. She's done everything. When we were married, there was not one wedding vow that covers any of this at all. And she has, especially with determination, it absolutely destroyed her. I'll always live with that guilt, but I've got off lightly. I've got off really lightly compared to what she's had to put up with, because I just bumble along in life, and whatever comes, you know, I'll deal with it, but I couldn't do it without. And so I think the effect has been worse on her than it has on me, without a shadow of doubt.
And your son's provided a very eloquent witness statement to the inquiry, and he talks about how he was robbed of the time that as a father and son, the two of you
Yes.
should have been able to do things together that you weren't able to do.
Yes.
Those are the questions I have for you. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, I'd like to thank Sir Brian, and I know Sir Brian will say it's his job to do it, but I'd like to thank you for the way it's been done, because that's what makes the difference. Not just that we've been listened to, but the kindness we've been shown by everyone here, yourself and the team as well. And although we've heard a lot about Professor Bloom through the different evidence, I'd like to say how well, since Professor Bloom, that we've been treated in Cardiff. They looked after my brother and me, and they still do now. They've been fantastic all the way through. And everyone here today has heard our story, and nobody else knows the story. I had to fight my family not to come here today. I could have filled the front row with the family. And I asked every one of them why they wanted to come. And they wanted to come to support us. They didn't want to come for themselves. If they wanted to come for themselves, I would have said, yeah, come. But I wasn't willing for them to come to support me, to listen to things, and there's things I've said today that they don't even know. There's a couple of people who's come down from London today to support us because they know more than anyone else does. So it's something we had to do today. But most of all, you've heard all our low lights. They are not highlights. But I want to thank publicly for everything she's done for me. Because, as you've heard, we've adapted to live through everything we've lived through. And believe it or not, sense of humour is a big part of it for us, isn't it? So, thank you all for listening to us. That's all I'm going to say.
Just going to ask Mr. Snowden if there's anything further he wants me to. Just one question in relation to the documents that Mr. Snowden asked me to ask. Paul, could we have back on screen, please, document 1275005? And if we could enlarge it. This is the letter from March 1985 that we looked at earlier because of what's said in the second paragraph about many haemophiliacs, of course, being exposed to the HTLV3 virus. But if we look just a little further down, we can see that this is some 9 months after you were told your diagnosis. And it's here that we see Professor Bloom saying, I've therefore counselled him and his wife regarding the use of barrier contraception such as condoms, and they may approach you for a prescription for these. And there's a reference to, in the bottom 3 lines, that Professor Bloom will shortly be talking to your brother and counselling your brother and his wife also. So it would appear from this that it's 9 months before that kind of advice was being offered to you.
Yeah.
Was there ever any more extensive counselling?
That's when you're pregnant, is it? Yeah. She was already pregnant by then.
Was there ever any more extensive counselling offered to you by Professor Bloom?
No, nothing at all.
Thank you. So that's everything.
I just want to thank you very much for coming here, particularly when you have deliberately kept yourself pretty much to yourself, as you've described, over the years for the reasons you've given us, despite everything that happened to you and your brother, or perhaps because of it. But thank you very much for telling us this today, because it is important to hear that type of testimony, to hear your story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we'll take a break till 2:20.
Thank you, sir.
2:20.